we probably would have done this at some point, but just the idea of like that I could take the podcast and this newfound love, like joy that I have with cycling and mountain biking, that I can like join it to. Yeah. And, I guess that is a lead into, why we're here and why we're talking. So we just got done doing a mountain bike ride. And when was the last time you've been on a mountain bike?
Like I was saying on the ride, I mean, I don't know. It's probably been, no exaggeration, I would guess at least 8 years. 5 years minimum, but I would say 8 years, maybe even longer than that.
Is that like that you've been on a bike or like mountain bike?
Mountain bike, I've only been on like maybe like 4 or 5 times my entire life. And a bike in general, I would say like my late or mid, I'd say like 24, 25, so I'm going on 33 since I've really done anything on a bike now that I think about it.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a minute for sure.
So what did you think of the ride? I know I asked you like leading into it, you were kind of a little nervous and you were kind of unsure of like what to expect, but now that we actually did a couple laps and then you were sessioning a few like the little skills area. Like tell me about that.
At the start, it was all balance. I was a little bit nervous just because one, I haven't done it in a long time. Like I like doing exercising and being mobile and stuff like that, but it's a totally different thing when you're like, there's almost like there was a layer of frustration at the beginning because it's like growing up, I was on a bike all the time. I was always active, whether it's motorcycle, bike, skateboard, basketball, football, like I just did anything and everything. I was super active as a kid. But I think the frustrating part is like knowing the muscle memory, the things that I've done, like that's still hardwired in my brain.
Yeah.
Like I used to ramp, I used to do all sorts of stuff back in the day. So it's like, that's all still there in my brain. But realizing my body doesn't have that muscle memory anywhere, I think that was where I was like, even getting started, I was like, wow, it's like crazy just being in my late 30s, like not having those muscles anymore, not having that balance anymore. And that's, I think, like not the most frustrating thing, but like frustrating in the sense of like, I know what I was able to do. Mm-hmm. And it was like getting warmed up and getting more comfortable and confident lap after lap. That's where I was like, and we did like 30 laps, 40 laps. Like, I don't know, what did you say? We probably did like 300 miles today.
Yeah, just about. Yeah, just about no, you crushed it, dude, because I know, like I've gone on like first time rides with people a few times. So it's, obviously the level of skill and like physical capability varies from person to person, but like, dude, you crushed it. I mean, we finished the first lap and I'm like, well, how you feeling? And he's like, we ended up doing the second one and then, spent like another 20 minutes just sessioning the little skills area, which like I saw you a couple times where I saw you kind of lifting up the bike a little bit, getting some air. So that was cool to see. It's awesome. And like, I think I'm excited to be able to kind of share this with other people because it's become like something that I have like really fallen in love with. And it's like not just mountain biking, but just cycling in general. And it's been like really instrumental for me to, be active, kind of break the, I guess the mold and just kind of be able to do something, like have another hobby outside of, the traditional filmmaking or photography, which, it's interesting because for me, it did start as a hobby and then it became work. And then somewhere in that, in that journey, it's become work. And not that I don't like it anymore, but you treat it differently because it is work, right? So you don't, I don't know. It's like, there's times where, you'll get on like a creative shoot or you'll do fun things on the side that kind of fill that same tank of like creativeness or whatever, like, why you wanted to do it in the first place. But it's not the same as like having a hobby where, you're either exercising or reading a book or, doing other things. So like, it's cool that I've found this and it's totally by chance. Cause like you said it's been years since you cycle. I never cycled before. Like even when I was younger, like outside of just like the little basic trails or whatever, like you do go on like a family ride, and like whenever I taught the kids how to ride bikes, but over the last few years, just being able to, get on like an actual nice bike and seeing how, that was fun to ride and was enjoyable and learning skills and just kind of, I don't know, it's cool because I feel like it's definitely has been an outlet for me to kind of just, think of other things, like usually when you're out on the trail, you're hyper focused on what's in front of you, on, the obstacles, you're staying balanced, you want to keep speed. So you have, there's so much going on that you don't have any time to think of like all the other shit that's going on.
Yeah. It's something you said too, is like with the fun thing, you know, like for me, there was like after the warm up period, like there's like the fun piece to it that kind of clicked in, like especially when we got over to like the skills training area or whatever. And it's like, that took me back to childhood. You know, it reminded me of like building ramps with my brothers and just like being daring and trying things. And obviously like I'm an old man now, but for me, it's like instantly I got to go back to like being a kid. And, you know, like that felt like mental time travel for me. And like, it was just like, oh, like this is so fun. And I'm getting to physically experience that, you know, as a dad, as a father, it's like I get to see my kids witness things, and like the secondhand like fun from that is one thing. But I don't think for myself, I'm even, you know, putting myself in a place to like really re-experience or experience fun quite like that was. So it's like a fun exercise versus like the exercise I do now is just like, it's kind of a means to an end, or to like, you know, get my head clear, which, you know, that happened today, but it was a lot more fun way to do that.
Yeah. And it's like, was it any, like, kind of level it off, kind of like where your expectations were with like kind of going into it? It's kind of like how it turned out for you. Like, was it a little scarier than what you were expecting, or easier than you were expecting?
Both, actually. I think it's both. It was a little bit scarier because truthfully, I was like, oh wow, I literally don't have the same balance that I had as a kid. So that part was scary. What surprised me was how quickly some of that muscle memory came back. And I was a little bit worried about getting winded really quick. And I surprised myself there that I was like, I definitely, you know, like got winded, and you taught me about the whole zone thing, which I found out on my watch, which was really cool. But I stayed in a pretty comfortable zone other than when we went over to like the practice area. So, you know, definitely there were some things that caught me off guard, mostly balance. But I think the thing that was surprising to me was definitely like, oh, I didn't get as winded. I'm sure I'm going to wake up tomorrow sore. So
yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited that the people that I have talked to, and like you, like actually being down to like even try this. So it's like, you know, as we talk, this is kind of like a season 2 of the Creative Block, and it's in the whole grand scheme of like wanting to you know, restart the podcast and start doing it. Then like trying to think of like different ways to, you know, be able to still kind of have similar message, and still have the same intention of like why I wanted to do the podcast, but making it, I don't know, I feel like tying it in with like cycling and like just doing the different things. It's, I feel like it's a little bit more closer to home to where I'm now than just kind of, you know, not that we're not going to have like these like serious conversations, but I think being able to kind of pair it in with like the cycling aspect, that it's something for me to kind of helps me to, you know, break out of my creative block. It's really for me an outlet of whenever I'm like going through shit or having some kind of frustration or whatever, like I jump on a bike, go on a trail, and it just helps me clear my head, whether it's like, you know, like I said, going through stuff or like even brainstorming. Or there's been times where like I'll come up with like ideas or kind of get inspiration just from like writing. So it's cool being able to share that and just kind of have like a different way of, you know, being able to, I don't know, spice up the podcast, you know, in a different way. So it's pretty cool. And like, I'm glad that we're just here doing it. So it's like, you know, and like I mentioned that like for me, this is kind of like an outlet to kind of break out of that creative block. And, you know, I've talked about this before where, you know, the reason why I started a podcast is to be able to have conversations with like other creatives. And it all originally started from, you know, me being kind of in a creative block and just having conversations with other people and just kind of hearing their different perspectives, and hearing that, you know, kind of gave me some inspiration. It kind of gave me some like different perspective to like learn and to take away different things that I could apply to myself. And like, I feel now that I have found a way that I can, you know, vocalize that to somebody else. Yeah. And even just being able to share the, you know, like the whole mountain biking thing. So it's cool. Like I get a big smile on my face every time somebody talks about, oh, hey, what does one of these bikes cost? Or, hey, this is a really nice bike, because that's literally what happened to me, man. Like I got on like a nicer bike, and then, you know, 3 years later, here I am like fucking, you know, I think like it's up there as far as like one of my, you know, like my most favorite hobbies. So like with that being said, like what are some ways that you kind of deal with like whenever you're going through a creative block, what are some things that you, I obviously you've talked about this before, and we've had a lot of conversation about like different things that you do to, keep yourself sharp and kind of, motivated and moving forward. Like, what are some of those things, for the audience that kind of help you, in the same way that, mountain biking helps me?
Yeah, I mean, I speak for myself in this, but I also think I speak for a lot of creatives with like, whether it's a block, whether it's burnout, whether it's just feeling frustrated or overwhelmed, it's all the same. We all deal with that. And I think wanting to live in a life where, I'm not frustrated, or I don't burn out, or I don't, have my frustration in my business is super unrealistic. However, like as a creative, as a filmmaker, as a video producer, as a whatever I want to call myself or label myself, it's like, I did start this thing because like, hey, it's like exciting, it's fun, it's my passion, it's my love. And then, you mentioned this earlier, we were talking about this earlier, is like, it becomes a job at a certain point. And, like, I'm so grateful to have this as a career. One of the things I've realized with like doing this for a decade now is that, you go through this little rut of like wanting to be perfect, wanting to do all the things, wanting to make money. And then, with a more broader scope, now it's like there's so many different things I do that kind of influence one thing or another. So when we look at like mountain biking, exercising, your diet, your family life, your social circles, like all these things are interconnected is the way that I look at it now. So when you can find things that interrupt, the mundane, the habit loop, you get into habits and routines, like anytime you can interrupt that, that's when you can kind of break out of those burnout sessions for me, and like I used to call it go mode back in the day in our business, where we'd go like 6 months, 3 months at a time doing the same things over and over. And we'd start to get resentful and frustrated, and it would take like pausing and just having a conversation. Like a lot of times it was Ross and me or someone else on our team that I talked to about like, hey, how can we improve? What are we doing great? So like a conversation is a good way to interrupt that. Looking for feedback, looking for input. That's a really simple way that I would interrupt that creative block. These days, it's like, it is having hobbies. I was really frustrated up until like 2018 of like those first 7 years building the business. It was hustle and grind. I prided myself on not sleeping more than like 2 to 3 hours a night. I was losing hearing. I was losing vision. I was having health issues. Like I was getting sick all the time. But for me, I really subscribe to that idea of like, I'm going to work really hard and this is what it takes. And like everyone's working this hard. And it wasn't until like I started to do some things for myself. And that first thing was like paying attention to my diet. The second thing was a little bit of exercise. The third thing was education for me, like podcasts, books, those things, like, and starting to like ingest more things than just things I wanted, like music. Hey, I like music. I love music. I make music videos. So it makes sense. But it's like an instant gratification. Whereas like if I can jump into a podcast or a book, I'm expanding my mind and I'm not just using my skills, I'm actually developing them.
You're right.
And I think that's a good way to remove some of those hurdles. These days I go for walks with my kids, I take my shoes off and put my feet in the grass. I'm like borderline a hippie in a lot of ways of just like, how do I maintain the best energy? What I really want to do is I want to maintain the best version of me. Me being burnout, frustrated, stressed out, it's going to happen. But however I can interrupt that pattern, however I can kind of make myself like feel better, I'm going to be a better husband. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to treat my clients better. When I have you guys on set, like I'm going to treat you guys better too. When I'm frustrated, it shows, and I'm pretty open to feedback, but there's not a lot I can do once I've exploded or frustrated or something like that on set. So, I mean, going for walks, exercising and all those things and listening to my body, like, that's made a really big difference.
Yeah, I've noticed the same for me as well. Like being able to, like on days when I don't do any kind of physical activity, whether it's going for a walk, for a ride, or just, quick workout or whatever it is, like, I don't know, you feel like that, like I have zero energy. So like even during the winter, like I was pretty good about being able to, get a few miles in, get on the bike and ride, even if the weather's shitty. But it's really, I feel like it's gotten to the point now where it's essential for my well-being, mentally and physically. Like I have to like do something and I don't know, it just helps, just clear the mind, because I feel like whatever pent up frustration or stress or whatever, like it just goes away because you're literally, you're channeling your energy when
Yeah.
you're working out, when you're doing something physical or strenuous. Like, previous guest, Aaron Butt, a really good friend of mine, and he's always really been big on like the whole physical aspect of like, working out and like being physical like that. It's crucial for like your well-being. Like, and it's, I've noticed that like a lot of peers that we have, friends and I mean relatives, and even people in our circles where that may not, be as big a big priority for them, and like I think it kind of goes to like what we we're talking about, like not so much like the health aspect. It doesn't mean that you have to like work out, but like having other hobbies or other things to channel that energy, and like we've talked about this, we were talking about this earlier while we were riding, that a lot of people don't have like those hobbies. So like how do you kind of break that pattern of, you're stuck in work, and you don't have anything to kind of like just, break that apart. So I think it's awesome that, we're able to do this, and I'm able to kind of share this with somebody. And yeah, I think it's cool. I think even like down the road, like I wouldn't even mind like kind of venturing and like doing something with like, maybe I'm sitting with you and we're like doing like a book, or we're going on a walk or something. Like, I wouldn't mind like expanding, like doing different things like that. I feel like, I don't know, I think that's also part of like me as a creative. Like I've always been like, I'm always kind of like, I get excited of like the potential of like trying to do something new. And like not necessarily that I get bored with like doing something over and over again, but like the idea of like doing something else, like that always kind of like sparks me. And we've talked about this, how like where like the whole like wonder, and like with the 6 types of genius. Yep. And it's kind of even just understanding that, like I guess we could even like talk a little bit about that, like how that's been like big for you, and how you assemble teams, or even just kind of see yourself in like in a workspace.
When I think about like an activity like this, or like any hobby we have, I think I would rewind back to like, it's really hard to figure out what that is for you. It really is. Like, you don't know you're unhappy. And I'm speaking from my experience. Like, I didn't know how unhappy I was until I started to do something for myself. When I was in that period of just like grinding for 7 years, I would have believed in any moment that I was happy. I was frustrated. I was stressed. But to me, I was like, this is just what you have to do. That was the lie I told myself all the time. And it wasn't until like I actually like started, like, it was fasting. That was the thing. I listened to a podcast, which I guess could be the trigger, but really I listened to a podcast. I listened to a guy talk about how unhappy he was with his weight and how he had tried fasting. And it felt like, oh, that's kind of similar to what I'm already doing. So I changed a few things in my diet, and that was like the trigger for like my energy started to come back up. I started to actually feel better. And like, I'm always someone who like puts a big value on discipline. And I'm very disciplined in like, say, my work hours or my career or things like that. But I wasn't very disciplined in like my fitness or my health. And in the previous 2 years, I had become a dad, and I was starting to get worried about like my health and things like that, but wasn't saying anything. I was being a typical man. I was holding everything in. And once I started to like experience self-love or being a little bit selfish, I was able to give myself the permission to be a little bit more selfish. And what I realized was I wasn't just doing this for myself, but I was starting to be able to give to more people in a much better way. And this was kind of the trigger for like real leadership for me. It was like, now I'm not all frustrated and mad because like my life is really about to implode and explode. I'm actually giving to myself, and I feel better, and I feel more focused. I'm actually able to be more present for my wife, for my kid, for the people around me. So then that gave me more permission to say, hey, what else can I learn in podcasts? So I started like developing this, like, I gotta devour information. And then I start like, oh, this person's talking about this book and that book. And I'm like, well, I'm not a reader. I'm kind of a dummy. Going to school, English was my worst subject. I was never good at reading. I'm still not a great reader, but I like to learn. And it's not about, it took a while for me to reform. Like, it's not about how fast I can read. It's not about how many things I can read. It's about what I can learn and what that can give as value to other people. So like, that's a big piece for me. So like moving into the 6 Types of Working Genius, which is a recent book that I read, like I love any book that helps me understand myself a little bit more. And I like that book too, because it gives me kind of a blueprint to maybe understand other people I'm working with as well. So it's like, for me, like I've always felt inadequate as a creative because I'm not good at ideation. I'm not good at dreaming up ideas. Like I can do it, but it takes a lot of brain calories. It takes a lot of work. It doesn't come to me naturally. And then like I compare myself to other creatives because they're so good at ideas. You know, if we're sitting and talking about Ross side by side, the guy I've been building a business with for 10 years, the guy is off the charts with ideation. He's so good at ideas.
I mean, look, we're here talking because of Ross.
Exactly. And you know, when I'd sit there and we'd have conversations, you know, like whether I was saying it out loud, I was thinking it internally. I was like, man, I'm just not a creative like he is. And that's right. I'm not a creative like he is. I'm not a person like him. What I am really good at is I'm good at coming up with ideas and plans and putting people in the right places, and it's like putting the right players in the right area. But I'm never sitting here giving myself credit for that. And this book really started to uncover that. It was like, no, that is a superpower. And just because there's these 6 different geniuses, I don't need to possess all of them. Really, I possess 2 of them. I'm okay at 2 of them, and I'm terrible at 2 of them. So, you know, the long and short of it is, I think just the more I can understand myself, I feel like long term down the line with my career, like how's that going to play out in all facets of my life, not just in my business or my career.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, and that kind of goes into like the whole, you know, you mentioned like self-love and just really understanding, being self-aware of who you are and what drives you and what motivates you, you know, just helps you lead your life in a way that you want to see, and being able to understand that. And like, I don't know, like, you know, you mentioned, you know, podcasts and reading have been, you know, key to helping you identify that. And like,
they're my idea generators because I don't have that. So I hear it from somewhere else. It gives me direction. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I feel like being able to talk to like you, to Aaron, to like Ross, or like other friends or like peers, and, you know, obviously even get some inspiration from like, you know, listening to podcasts and stuff. But that's, you know, really big for me, is kind of like that inner circle and just kind of seeing what everybody's doing and being able to get feedback or just little things here and there that really help. You know, it kind of like triggers me to like, oh, maybe that's something that I could apply, or maybe it's something that I could do. I feel like, I've always done a bad job of like being able to identify that. And like, I think now as I've gotten older and, you know, become more self-aware and learn more about myself, that it really has been, it's key being able to identify that, and kind of helps you, you know, have direction of where you need to go and what you want to do. That's why, like, even us just having this conversation, you mentioned Ross, and that's literally what we were talking about. Is, you know, we were having a conversation about being able to, yes, I want to start the podcast. I haven't done it in a while. And like, not that I felt some kind of way about it, but I wanted to be, I don't know, I didn't feel necessarily that I felt like I was kind of like restricted in a way of being able to having to sit down and like have conversations with people. And like, I really enjoyed the conversations that we had. But, you know, just talking about it, he was like, hey, well, what if you just take people out on rides and just have a conversation afterwards, and kind of use that as an icebreaker and be able to have the conversation. And, you know, like it hasn't been a secret. Like I've always, you know, in the podcast, I've always talked about how I've never really been super confident in being in front of the camera or talking or articulating myself. And like, this is just another way of me being able to just be comfortable in my environment.
Yeah.
And just have a conversation. And like, this is no different than a conversation that we would have on any other day. You know, save the flies flying in your face. Yeah. But it's, I don't know, it's pretty cool. I think just that like, I really like the idea of being able to just switch up the environment, and it's a way to spice up the podcast. We can still have similar conversations, but also be able to bring somebody into like out of their comfort zone a little bit and try something different. So that's something I'm really looking forward to, is continue to see like the kind of reactions I get from people on, you know, what their take is on like mountain biking, whether it's like super hard or fuck this, I don't want to do this anymore. Because I half expect to get some of that. But it's cool that, yeah, I can share that with other people. You know, because I feel like that was being introduced to like the whole cycling world has been big for me, and like in all aspects of life, and kind of just how you said, how listening to podcasts and, you know, going on walks and reading, like cycling does the same for me. And it's, I've been exposed to like a whole new world where even even like I've kind of figured out that, oh, I can do things that I enjoy, but also still be able to share the message that I want to share, and use my skills in a totally different world. We talk about like the connections to the bike shop, or the mountain bike league, which I think I've shared with you that like I'm coaching my son's youth mountain bike team, and just being exposed to that, it's opened up like a whole new world for me that I think I've gotten to the point now where like I want to be able to share that and kind of incorporate that into like who I am online, offline, everywhere. And like I feel like it's changing up the format like this kind of makes it a little bit more unique to me.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for that, and like looking forward to just continuing to have conversations like that. I know we've talked about some of the things that you've been getting into recently with you started a couple podcasts, and they're kind of like in the works. Like what's how has that been for you, especially seeing all the all the work that you've done previously with Ross and things that you've learned? How have you been able to apply that into the pods that you're producing now?
Well, I think that's a great question, and for a couple reasons, because my podcast isn't necessarily like a formal one where I don't know that it's going to continue or not. It's really designed to be a lead magnet and education tool to help serve our businesses. And, one thing that I think is important when you're thinking about, like, not everyone's going to be into podcasts, not everyone's going to be into books, and neither, you don't have to be. But when I'm absorbing information, like that's the learn phase. When I'm going on a jog or a walk, or I'm seeking solitude, that's the build phase for me a lot of times. So like us going out here on this ride, or me going on a jog, that's where ideas actually start to happen for me. Like when it comes to ideation for me, I need to give myself the mental space to have a thought. I love absorbing a lot of information, and that's that downloading of information. But then when I can go on an exercise or a jog or a walk or a drive with no music or nothing to distract me, that's when when I feel like I'm really building my business, when I'm building ideas, when I'm generating ideas. So if you look at our websites, if you look at our podcasts, if you look at social media, if you look at anything that I'm kind of building on the digital space, or even myself, there's a lot of ideas. Like our mission statement came when I was on a walk. And I was like, oh, this is it. These are the beats. Like it wasn't all perfectly there, but I was like, here's a beat, here's a beat, here's a beat, here's a beat. Now I feel like I have something that has our values, that has all those points there. With the podcast in general, like we built one for JCP, for our music video brand, and we built one for Mylan. That's the start, that's the incubator. And for me, a good idea is one that you can execute on, get to a version 1. For me, it's like, I talk about my work all the time, and there's so many conversations I have with clients where I'm educating them on this idea or that idea. I started to think, I was like, how great would it be if there was a resource for them to be able to either listen and watch and learn about these things, whether they hire us or whether they don't. This becomes a tool for them to be able to either 1, DIY it, 2, hire us because they like us, or 3, make an educated decision in going out amongst like a bunch of different vendors and get the right hire. One of our values is sustainability with both of our businesses. Our values, while we have different niches, we have the similar values across them. And one of those things is sustainability. We don't want clients to overspend. We want them to start thinking more long-term, more proactive. These are words that we use all the time when we're on these calls. So if I can start to educate someone and build a relationship with them when I've never been on the call, never been on a phone, that was the whole idea behind these things. So it's not your traditional podcast where it's like, oh, you can build a long-term 4-year relationship with me. No, right now there's 10 to 13 episodes for each one of those shows. And that might be it. Like right now they were all designed to be able to go into emails or to be, leads of like, hey, you're not ready to work with us right now, but you have these questions. Here's a resource that helps educate you in that process. And, that was intentional. That was a thought that I had on a run of like, hey, how can we meet our customers at scale? Because like, we keep it small. We keep it very relationship focused for a reason. But I'm trying to think about the next 10 years of growth. And I'm like, how can I meet them along the way and still have valuable content to meet on social media, to send to them as an easy link, to be able to educate and explain myself a little bit easier. So that's the whole idea behind that. And, that wouldn't have happened without, having a hobby that helps unlock my mind.
Yeah, it's, it really is, I don't know, like it's crazy. Like you think about it, I guess you don't think about it until like until it clicks. Like I never really thought to, you know, connect the two where, you know, you have a hobby or some outlet that is not on in line with like your job or your day to day. And like, even if you're not in working in the creative world, it's having different outlets, hobbies, they're kind of like they're a funnel to being able to move forward into whatever it is that you want to do in life. So I think it's if there's something that like I'm a really strong advocate for, is for people to you know, get introduced, partake, try out different things, because yeah, it can help you, you know, be involved into the next best thing, or even just unlock like this next like level in your like self-awareness or yourself, you know, like your in your life, in your development of life as you grow older. You know, like I tell that to the kids, to my kids, and we talk about that, about being able to get involved with like other things. And like, yes, you know, video games is a part of that, and sure, there's like you know, I feel like there's a time and a place for that, but I've always been really big on encouraging them in trying different things, even if they're unsure if they're gonna like it, or if they're not, you know, if it's like, I'm not so sure about that. You know, even like the whole cycling thing, like my son got introduced to it same way I did, fell in love with it. He's even more skillful than I have, and he's does a lot more crazier shit that I do, and he enjoys it a lot. So that's been really cool. That even on like, that's been another trigger for me, is that like, not only has it become an outlet for me to, you know, kind of break from the mold and do something different, but now that's something that I also share with my son. So like, we've been able to like bond and like share all these experiences that I didn't necessarily have with my father, with anything in general. So like, it's cool being able to share that with him as well. So it's like, it's helped me like everywhere, like in personal life, for work, and for everything. Yeah. So I think it's really, I think it's great for people to be able to identify that. And like, you know, you said, whether it's reading, venturing out, trying different things, going on a walk, exercising, like those could be like different incubators or catalysts for people to, yeah, just kind of find a thing that, you know, kind of keeps them moving forward, or kind of helps them, you know, do something fun or enjoy themselves. It's I don't know, I feel like a lot of people take that for granted, and I did for many years, where I didn't really have any hobbies, where I was that same person where would just work, didn't really do anything else, go home. I mean, sure, you'd watch movies or, you know, do that, but like, I feel like it doesn't have the same effect as like you actually going out physically doing something else, or just doing something entirely different than what like your day to day is. So it's pretty cool just seeing that. I mean, even, you know, when you think about it, like all the people that I talk to that have had some kind of like success, and I feel like it's a reason why everybody, like, they'll have either they're working out, or they do, you know, go on walks, or do like the cold plunges and stuff. And I always used to think like that shit was just like super cliche, or like, yeah, that's, you know, I don't see myself getting into that. But like, you know, like I said earlier, if I go a couple of days where I don't get like any physical activity, man, my energy and like my focus level just kind of goes through the drain. And
yeah, I so relate to that. And I also think like, something you said there's like, I don't see myself doing that. And you know, for me, it's like whether it's a book or a podcast or an exercise or anything, it's like, how's this making me 1% better? Like that is the goal, you know, and that's not a lot, but that's a good thing and a healthy thing to aim for. Is like, you know, if you saw me 5 years ago, like there's no way I would take my socks and shoes off and put them in the grass, because that would be silly. You know, I didn't make getting sunlight a priority. You know, we live in Ohio. It can be absolutely brutal here. You know, I'm a huge advocate for like vitamins and supplements to help manage my mood and level. You know, I'll preach vitamin D all day long. And, you know, at the end of the day, like, it's about like making the best version of myself. And, you know, even if this doesn't check the box right now, it might check the box down the road. You know, it's like, sometimes I'll be a little bit more into like rest, you know, meditation, stretching, just it's listening to my body. You know, it's not like I wake up every day and I'm like, I'm going to go for a jog, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to journal, I'm going to do this, because then it becomes overwhelming and it becomes an obligation. I think when you can have a variety of things that you're doing that you can shake off the day to day, you know, like earlier part of my career, it was art. I'm an artist. Like, it was all about the cinematography, the lighting, and making beautiful images. That's what I was chasing. You know, the past 4 or 5 years of my career, it's been about learning how to be a business owner and learning the necessary skills, learning how to make an experience of the pipeline, managing those things, setting expectations. And I feel like I'm at the start of my next career, which is like more systematizing in a human way to get more of my time back. You know, so it's like, how can I optimize this while still keeping that experience great, to where I can manage the lifestyle with my family, to where I can maybe eventually, you know, like bigger goals beyond running, you know, Mylan, JCP, and like the business side of stuff is like, I want to, you know, do more educating to creatives, like the coaching stuff that I've been getting into very, very lightly in the last couple of years. Like, that's a huge source of excitement for me. Like, I love when like some creatives in a place that I've been before, and I can listen to them or ask them some questions and help them get through a rut themselves. It's not like I'm coming in like hitting the easy button and doing this. Like, It's awesome to give them the gift of discovering that for themselves. Like, I want to do more of that in the future. So right now, systematizing, optimizing the businesses while not sacrificing any quality, not sacrificing the experience for our clients, that's going to give me more bandwidth to be able to do that the right way. Additionally, it's like narratives, documentaries, like I'm taking small swings at that right now. They're relatively big swings, but they're small swings in comparison to what I want to be doing in 4 or 5 years from now. Like, I want to do narrative-based stuff. I want to do documentary stuff. And it's like, by running a healthy business, by optimizing it, we're going to have more profitability. We're going to have more revenue. We're going to be more responsible. And then we're going to be able to give other filmmakers shots. We're going to be able to produce projects. We're going to be able to do those things. And I believe that that's going to happen. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that because I'm still figuring those things out. But I'm optimistic 4 to 5 years from now, that's going to be the lane I'm going to be putting a lot of my extra time into. So how do I take 100% of my time into the business, not physically 100%, but that energy, and how do I sculpt out 10%, then 20%, then 30%? And like really manage relationships and set other people up to do this well so that I can spend more time over here and grow something else, you know? So it's like, it's, you know, I start off with one business and then we get into weddings and we get into this, and, you know, it's just one thing after another. And each business, each thing doesn't become a distraction, but it becomes, here's a blueprint that worked over here. Let's apply it over here and build this thing up. Okay, this is working pretty good and we learned some new information. Let's take the blueprint of these 2 things, build this next thing. And that's exactly what we're doing with the coaching. That's exactly what we're trying to do with narrative and documentaries. And it's like, they're unknown variables, 100%.
Right.
But we're really good at this baseline of stuff that's going to give us an unfair advantage stepping into a new element.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that you guys have always been really good at, is like, taking the things that have worked here and applying them into the next thing. And that's, I think that's what, that is what has allowed you guys to scale at the rate that you have, but also be able to be really good in those areas. Cause I think, you know, we've, you know, I've expressed, you know, having worked with a lot of different people, like different agencies, other creatives, like I really enjoy working with you and like the leadership that you provide and how you and Ross and just everyone that works together. Like, I feel like it really helps. You really do a good job of like positioning people where they will be best to succeed, where, you know, and whether it's an area where they want to get improved on or get better at, or this is an area where maybe they might not even realize that this is something that they might be good at. Like, you've always been really good about sharing tidbits and like ideas or giving suggestions on like, hey, you know, I don't know, like even like on those coaching calls, I've been on some of those, and some of the questions you ask really like get you thinking and be like, oh, I didn't really think about it this way. Like maybe if I start incorporating this is going to be, you know, something that'll, you know, help me further my career path or help me do things better. And that's, I want to be able to do more of that with the podcast and with being able to not only get comfortable with like talking to people, but just being able to share my journey and kind of like my experiences with people. And like, it's, that's why it's cool that we're in a different format, we're out of the office, we're out in nature. So as we start to like wrap up, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to, you know, like our listeners to take away from the conversation, from the ride? It could be anything.
I'll come back to stress. That's kind of going to be my key takeaway, because I think, it's easy to label things as one thing or another when most things are on a spectrum. I mean, would you agree that like there's like, it's never just like it's good or it's bad.
Yeah,
there's
it's
always
like somewhere in
gray
between.
area.
Yeah,
There's
for sure.
something in between. I think whether it's physical fitness, whether it's challenging yourself in some way, it's like there's a difference in chronic stress and acute stress. Acute stress is healthy. It's choosing the stress. It's saying, hey, I want to challenge myself. I want to grow. This is an area I want to grow. Sometimes this takes asking a few of those questions. So if I was to put the coaching hat on for a second, I was like, it's not about like saying like, hey, Louise, what do you think I should do? Well, you don't know what I need. You don't know how I need to grow my business. A lot of times it's asking yourself like, what is it that's like frustrating me? What are the things that keep coming up over and over and over? Because that's creating chronic stress. That's creating problems, and it's stacking up, and you're avoiding it and you're pushing away. It's always going to come back up. Stress, anxiety, it's always going to stack back up. So if it's really important that you work through this, then you got to make a plan to tackle this. Otherwise, it's going to tiptoe into that unhealthy chronic stress side of things. So it's so much better for you to look at like, what challenges can I do in life? How can I tackle those things? How could I interrupt this? Like, again, when I say listening to your body, like if you're doing the same thing 7 days a week, like you're probably just bored. And that boredom is turning into stress.
Yeah.
And then you're feeling resentful, you're feeling mad. Like if you're in a day-to-day job and you work with the same people all the time, like just shaking it up and going to a different restaurant, going to a different place and absorbing that. You don't have to get on a mountain bike. You don't have to go for a run. You don't have to read a book or any of those things. But just asking yourself, what would be fun to me? What's something that like distracts me in a good way? Like not just, watching a Netflix series. That can be fantastic. I love that because as a filmmaker, it's amazing to watch a story. But that's not going to check the box for everyone. Are you actually watching it, or do you have this on? You're on your phone, you're distracting yourself in 3 different ways because you're so bored. So if we're looking at stress, it's like finding ways to push your boundaries, to grow yourself. That's going to be more fulfilling. It's going to be really difficult, but you're experiencing growth. And as humans, we want growth. We all want growth, whether we want to admit it or not. It's hard in the moment, but when you challenge yourself, when you lean into that acute stress, you're going to feel better on the other side. And my advice to going through something difficult is like either to journal or to like just look back and think, how was my life 6 months ago, a year ago, 6 months, 6 years ago? And this could also be a good assessment for like where you're at right now. Is like, say you look back 6 years ago and you say like, my life was great then. What were some of the things you were doing? Don't beat yourself up on that. You have data. You have information that says, hey, I was my happiest when I was 22 years old. What was I doing? And like, can I apply any of that to my day-to-day life now? Maybe you're not going to get the exact same thing, but you can apply some of that. Whoa! You can apply some of that information to like making your life better now. So it's not always like, you're not always going to look back and say like, I'm just growing, killing it. I'm so much better. There are things that I did better 10 years ago that I'm just trying to readapt in small ways in my life now. There are things I do today that like 10 years ago me would never have a clue that I would be able to accomplish or do those things. So it's like stress is just all about looking at it and managing it from the unhealthy to the healthy and looking at it as growth points. That's my big takeaway.
I don't think I could find a better way to close the pod. So, Josh, thank you for going on the ride with me, and 2, sitting with me here in the woods and do another pod episode. Thanks for coming back on.
Well, as a father of young kids, I would say a high five is the way to do it. It's the corny dad thing to do.
Let's go. Good stuff, man.
All right, good stuff. Thank you.
And that's it. Well, thank you everyone for listening.